Okay.
See, Nikki, when the red light turns on, that means it's rolling. Hey, folks, we are
Good.
back. Robb Wolf here, Nikki Violetti, my beautiful and illustrious wife. And
Illustrious. Wow.
We're flying
That's an
with,
adjective I haven't had applied to me before.
with my receding hairline, which looks amazing
Oh,
today.
better than my staple line, as my dad likes to say. When my hair color grows out, it looks like I have a line of staples down the middle of my
You have
head.
a reverse Cruella de Vil thing going on, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Aging sucks is pretty much what I came to. But I don't know that that's what anybody else came to for this podcast.
No, we're
If
here for
anybody does
Q&A.
still come to this podcast.
Q&A. You want to dig in?
Sure. Shall we? Surely.
Surely. Okay,
Is there
we
anything
shall.
else we need to update people on? Not really?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we're
I'm gonna make
ready
I've
to
got
dig
this
in.
thing turned up. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
I think our audio is
you know
better,
what?
so that's good. Oh, you're wearing
I don't actually need
headphones. You don't need
for
headphones.
now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Put those down.
So I'll just set them down. Sorry, folks, getting the hang of this thing, but we did have a few people report that our sound quality was much improved, and it will improve over time. We're chipping away at it. We have other things to do, but one day at a time, sweet Jesus. So,
All right, let's jump into the first question from Trolls on chocolate-covered
and I believe that's pronounced
Peanuts.
Rose.
chocolate-covered peanuts.
Chocolate covered what? Excuse me?
Okay, he
You
says,
Manx you. Man.
I normally base my diet on paleo principles, but for the past month, I've been eating roughly 400 grams of sugar and chocolate-coated peanuts a day.
Hey, I just have to pause here. 400 grams for all of us dirty Americans. This is one thing I just have to divert here. The fact that we do not use the metric system is a embarrassment to me. I just have to say that as an aside. But 454 grams, if I recall correctly, is a pound in the old English system. So he's eating damn near
pound
about three
of
quarters of a
chocolate-covered
pound of
peanuts.
chocolate-covered peanuts.
That's a
Chocolate-covered?
lot.
What are you saying?
Peanuts.
Okay. Just want to be
What do you need your ears cleaned? Do we need to do some of the, what do they call that? Like
waxing,
the candling, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, this should be unhealthy, but my digestion has improved after having been out of whack for months because of SSRIs. And I have consistent morning wood, which mainly due to SSRIs has been rare. The peanuts.
Chocolate-covered penis. Okay. Freudian slip, Fraulein?
No, I swear, we'll get it transcribed. I never said it. Despite eating more than 2,000 calories just in candy each day, half of which is sugar, I still look lean, almost too lean, and if anything, I'm adding muscle. Most people are going to be hating this guy when they hear this. Let's see. I notice a small sugar high and subsequent low, but that's pretty much the negative effects. Also, by doing this, I'm ingesting good amounts of magnesium and zinc, about 400 milligrams and 10 milligrams respectively. I'm male and 32 years old. 2 questions. Am I doing too much latent damage for this to be a good thing, or could it be that this could work for some people, at least for some period? And how do I make sense of obesity epidemics, the grocery shoppings of fat people, and energy balance when I can consume much more than 2,700 calories a day and stay lean? I don't think I work out much, and many days I also eat an energy-rich evening meal.
Those are good questions. This is actually a really good, there's a lot of stuff going on here, including peanuts and penis, apparently. So am I doing too much latent damage? I mean, that's so hard to really know. I mean,
Blood work. I mean, really.
Blood work would be the thing to look at. We would look at some lipoprotein profiles to really get a sense of what's going on there. A1C, LPIR score, lipoprotein insulin resistance score. Again, we're working on some stuff, so you folks will have some great resources in that regard. But, you know, generally, if your sleep is good, if morning wood is good, or in the case of females, like just good libido and you're generally feeling good. I mean, the fact that you get a little high, little low after this, I don't know that that's that concerning. I'm not really a huge Ray Peat fan, but I mean, he makes the case that sometimes some sugar or some additional carbs or there's some magic between fructose and sucrose and stuff like that. And maybe some of that's going on here, you know, although low carb and ketogenic diets are the bee's knees for some people, they're not great for everybody. So
but it has a month. So he's been doing this for a month. Is a month long? And I mean, for some people, certainly, like even like a day of this they would notice adverse effects. But I mean, if he continues this for 3 months, 6 months, like
it could just be something. The simplest thing to maybe track is like A1C, because he is consuming a lot of sugar.
Right.
So we could go get a A1C test kit at any pharmacy. I think even in Europe you can still get that. Like they make a lot of stuff, you know, prescription only, but I think you can still buy those over the counter. And I would just track that. And then also like body composition seems to be good, so long as body composition, performance, leanness, you know, sexual function, all that stuff seems good. Then it seems hard to really you know, vilify this thing. And as an aside, like if this stuff is dark chocolate, which it's probably not like 85% dark chocolate, they just seem to not do that when they do like chocolate covered nuts and stuff like that. But still, cocoa has a lot of interesting, good stuff in it. So from the kind of phytonutrient perspective, I know in carnivore land, there are no good phytonutrients, you know, these hormetic stress things, but it you know, for some people it's of benefit. And then how do you make sense of this with regards to the obesity epidemic, grocery shopping, of fat people, overweight people, trolls, be kind and to folks. Energy balance, when you consume more than 2,700 calories a day and stay lean. He doesn't work out a ton. And he has an energy.
Well, this goes back to the fact that not everybody is the same, right?
Exactly.
Like what he's doing could put many people in a diabetic
big
state.
Problem. And you know, do we have a moment for a diversion?
Sure.
I don't know why, but something popped into my head, and it's around just like so. Oh man, spit it out, Rob. Talk. So the evidence-based nutrition folks really like to poop. You know, they'll spend a ton of time saying sugar really isn't a problem, and you know, they're citing these metabolic ward studies, and nobody lives in a metabolic ward. And you know, this is an interesting example where you could make the case that it's probably a hyperpalatable food, you know, or at least damn tasty, and it certainly is. It's probably the largest contribution calorically to his diet currently. So it's kind of, you know, but again, within the constraints of what Trolls has going on, it seems to be working for him. But I was thinking back about my mom's kind of health journey, and I think I've related in books and podcasts. She's, as far as I can remember, she always had health problems. And then she and my grandmother joined this thing, TOPS, Taking Off Pounds Sensibly. And it was like this calorie counting deal, and they went each week and they had these meetings and everything. And I remember my mom was eating super low fat, super high carb. This is when we bought our first popcorn popper and all this stuff. And she got the lightest that she ever was that I can remember in her adult life. And then she got super fucking sick. Like it was like one day she got up and she was wrecked. And this is where it took another 10 plus years, maybe 15 years, to get like the celiac diagnosis and the rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis and all these other things. But generally, if people lose weight, we see improvements in health. And I don't know if, say, like maybe her cardiovascular disease profile improved, but for some reason, like her autoimmune stuff took off. I don't know if she caught a virus that kicked it over. Like I just don't remember any of that stuff. But it is interesting that at some point the food quality stuff does add up, and it does matter. And just losing weight isn't always the route to ultimate health. Like and again, I don't know why this stuff happened with my mom, but for some reason it's been popping up in my head a lot, that because of some of the stuff that's gone on where it's held up as, so long as you lose weight, everything's going to be good. And this was not the fucking case for her. Now, N equals 1, and there's all kinds of other circumstances. But we've also had a number of people mention things like this. Like they'll do some of the flexible dieting stuff and they get super lean. Like we had a number of people in Reno that when we did talks, they would, come up to us and be like, yeah, I was at 4% body fat. And then I've been broken ever since. And now I'm on thyroid meds and all this other stuff. So
also just from an aging perspective, as much sugar as he's eating is also
could be a problem.
Great.
Could be a problem.
And then with regard to that, how do I make sense of obesity epidemics? Like he says he's eating 2,700 calories a day and staying lean, but there are a lot of people eating a lot more than 2,700 calories
right.
too.
And I'm wondering if he's not talking about that just from, like he said he's eating 2,000 calories in just candy a day. So I'm assuming he's eating more than 700 calories of other foods. So.
I think he's eating just chocolate covered peanuts, and I also eat an energy rich evening meal.
Okay.
So he's eating chocolate covered peanuts all day long and then having dinner.
I didn't get that of it. Huh.
That's how I'm reading
then
it.
Some of what's going on there is some otherwise caloric restriction from everything else. So, I mean, if this was layered onto, 3 meals a day, there might be some serious problems. So, okay. Have we beat that one to death? Yeah, so. It's a really interesting question, and there's a lot of moving parts there, and there's just honestly like a ton of unknowns when you get right down to it.
Okay, our second question for this week is from Jason on DHEA and Pregnenolone supplementation. Rob, I'm a 45-year-old male. Job is sometimes stressful, but for the most part, I get 8 hours of sleep and follow a lower carb paleo diet 6 days out of 7. Been doing this for close to a decade. I've been experimenting for a year or more with Pregnenolone and DHEA in varying amounts. When I take Pregnenolone in doses of 200 to 400 milligrams before bed, I feel great and everything works really well. Focus, mind, and man things. Same if I take 100 milligrams or so of DHEA. I'll use these on weekends mainly and not so much during the week. I notice during the week without them, I tend to be bitchy and emotional with low sex drive. If I take Pregnenolone or DHEA, these issues go away. I'm afraid I'm taking too much or somehow dependent on these supplements now. What should I be looking out for or the downsides to these substances? I feel like I'm playing with fire.
Man, this is it's an interesting topic. I would view this approach like on the HRT spectrum to be like one of the really minimally invasive approaches, because what we're doing is providing some substrate both on the Pregnenolone side and also on the DHEA side, which can mitigate cortisol issues, that can augment testosterone potentially. But also, specifically with DHEA, it can cascade into testosterone and be converted into estrogen. And this is some of the problem with folks taking really high amounts of DHEA, which these amounts are pretty high. Like most people seem to get, what I would recommend is tinkering with fractions of these doses, like the DHEA starting off at like 25 milligrams a day and see how you do, and try to find like a minimum effective dose. Sometimes you need to find a compounding pharmacy to get that done, because some people will notice, like in men specifically, prostate issues and some problems related to this stuff converting in a not great way. As to the dependency thing, we've talked about this on other podcasts, and we've talked with our good friend, Dr. Kirk Parsley. He's cited research that the average 40, 45-year-old male has testosterone levels about 3 times lower than what our grandparents did. And we don't, is it the xenoestrogens? Is it sleep? Is it radio frequency? Like, we don't know. Maybe it's all of the above. We don't really know exactly what it is. Clearly mitigating the cause would be great, but it's oftentimes hard to pin down. But what we do seem to find is whatever diet, lifestyle, and kind of medical intervention that fixes that stuff and makes people feel better seems to generally be a good thing. And the whole HRT topic is really controversial, both from like the Lance Armstrong drug testing cheating thing, which, I mean, Jason's probably like me, like a middle-aged has-been athlete who just wants to feel good, and this stuff will definitely help. And so it's interesting how people moralize that. But the advice I would give is to actually tinker with much lower doses on this, maybe closer to like 50 milligrams on the Pregnenolone and more like 25 milligrams on the DHEA. And then just tinker with, ratcheting those up and down. And certainly you could do like 1 day on, 1 day off would be one way to cycle this stuff. And I would go in and whatever protocol, figure out a protocol, whether it's 1 day on, 1 day off. I would get some levels checked. You can do either saliva, but I would honestly probably do blood levels of both DHEA, sulfate, and Pregnenolone and just see where you are. I was tinkering with this a little bit, and I had DHEA levels. I was taking 100 milligrams every third day or something, and my DHEA levels were honestly too high. And so I had to go to like every fifth or sixth day. So that's what I would tinker with.
Okay. Let's see. Our next question is from Radu. How does one decide if the ketogenic diet is beneficial or not?
This one's long, and we will fill in some details at the end, but there's some really good stuff here. But
and we'll post all that. He includes a lot of his blood work, so we'll share that in the show notes.
This is definitely something that if you want to cruise by and check out the show notes, that would probably be helpful.
Okay. So he says, "Hi, Rob. I would like your opinion regarding how somebody would decide if the ketogenic diet is beneficial or not, or if you have recommendations for tailoring a ketogenic diet to people with an increased cholesterol reaction to the diet. Are there relevant tests that can help in deciding in this regard? In my family history, there are lots of cancer, some heart disease, and some neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's. I'm 48 years old, Caucasian, in very good health and decent physical shape. My diet is a loose paleo type with occasional milk and grains, and I have no allergies. I would like to have some periods of ketosis as I feel some benefits from it, but I do not know how concerned I should be." And then he includes some before and after blood work. So before he went keto, his total cholesterol was 194. Triglycerides were 254. And then 9 months after keto, total cholesterol down to 178. Triglycerides down to 44, which is great. And then he repeated this experiment a year later, and his total cholesterol started going up to a high of 321. So he is concerned about cholesterol.
Yeah, and so again, we'll put the specific numbers on here. So what I'm taking from this also is that he tested the blood tests after 9 months, so he was done with the ketogenic diet.
He's done. It's been an intermittent thing. So he did it, tested his blood work 9 months later, and then a year later did keto again. Did his blood work throughout.
So a couple of things here. So this is why I hate standard blood testing, because it does not tell us at all what's going on. Just on the cholesterol side, frequently, if you see the LDL cholesterol fraction, it will say calculated. What's going on in these scenarios, or can occur, depending on what type of test is used. The chylomicrons, which are moving fat out of the gut, can be about the same size as some of the lipoproteins that we're looking for with regards to cholesterol testing. So you could misidentify the chylomicrons as, say, like LDL cholesterol or cholesterol at large. And so that could give us a really squirrely reading. The calculated, like the Friedwald equation to calculate this stuff, was helpful for its day when we had no other options. But what I would really encourage is getting an LDLP particle count via LabCorp. You can order that through Specialty Health in Reno.
We can put that link in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes. If you're outside the United States, then nobody is really doing the LDLP. What you could do is an ApoB, which I think he has an ApoB in there.
Yep, he did ApoA and ApoB.
Which can be kind of a proxy for, and the ApoB doesn't look crazy. So I'm almost thinking that some of the cholesterol issues are kind of like an artifact of just poor cholesterol testing. But this is, again, where like the type of testing is really important, can be really helpful. We have a question coming up next here about, I don't know if it's the next one, but one of them, the frequency of like carbohydrate intake and what the effect would be on ketosis. I think intermittent ketosis is going to be great for a lot of people. It's there have been some interesting mouse studies where they used an intermittent ketogenic diet, basically 1 week on, 1 week off. And we have to remember that a day in mouse metabolic terms is about a week in human metabolic terms. So it's very, very different. But there was a consistent group of mice that was on a ketogenic diet, and they were tracked over time, and their health and performance improved, and they had great longevity and health span stuff, but they had to limit the food for these mice so that they didn't gain weight. And then there was another group that the way that because this particular strain of mice has a tendency of gaining weight while in ketosis, the other group did 1 week on, 1 week off. Excuse me. And they had pretty similar results, although the longevity, lifespan, physical performance pieces, so they were roughly equal in longevity and lifespan, but the purely ketogenic mice showed dramatically better physical performance late in life relative to the cyclic group. So they don't know if that's like an energy substrate story, if it's some HDAC inhibition due to ketone bodies. Like they have some ideas about how to test this stuff so that we can get some further information. So there's probably an assumption here that there's a gradient. Reducing carbohydrate in general probably has some performance, health, and longevity benefits. And again, that's going to be incredibly relative from person to person. Some people are much more carb tolerant and some people are much less. And so there's going to be a gradation there. But then beyond that, intermittent ketosis probably offers benefits above and beyond no ketosis. And then consistent ketosis may have the greatest benefit with regards to this longevity and health span stuff. Now, that's all within the caveat that we aren't worsening an atherogenic environment in our cardiovascular system, which for some people, they do seem to, with high saturated fat intake, they tend to see dramatically elevated lipoproteins. And we've seen people on both sides of this spectrum. Like we met a guy at PaleoFX who has positive coronary calcium scores and has been kind of paleo low carb, and it's seemingly either not working for him or you don't know. Maybe it is like you don't really know what else could have been worse, you know. But then we have people that have much higher lipoprotein counts than this gentleman has, and they are 0 on their coronary calcium. Like they appear to have no overt disease process going on. So this is where, you know, ideally you all this stuff plays out like the way that Luis Villaseñor does this. Like his blood work's fucking beautiful, looks great, he has great performance, he definitely doesn't look 42 years old or whatever he is at this point. He's been doing this stuff 20 years. Like I think he's really banking like the maximum benefit of doing something like this. And then you have other folks that the blood work isn't quite as nice as what we would like, and then it gets a little murky. We need to do some additional testing to see what's going on, and that's kind of the way that I would parse this stuff out. But at a minimum, I think that some amount of intermittency around ketosis could certainly be helpful, and that could be time-restricted feeding. It could be time-restricted feeding plus adding MCT oil to the mix. Like this is where there's lots and lots of different ways to tackle this other than just specifically a ketogenic diet. And then even within that, I'll add one other caveat and then shut up on this. More of a Bernstein-esque, Dr. Bernstein's diabetes solution, or a Ketogains, like a more protein-centric approach where we're not driving ketosis at the expense of protein intake. There are some people that whole HMG-CoA reductase enzyme system, which synthesizes cholesterol, it can convert ketones into cholesterol and therefore lipoproteins. This can and does happen pretty much in everybody, but for some people, that spigot is just like wide open. And so their ketones go up and their cholesterol goes up immediately. Now, again, there's a question. Is that meaningful from a cardiovascular disease perspective? And we don't really know. It is, I like Peter Attia's kind of takedown on this, which is that lipoproteins are necessary but likely not sufficient for cardiovascular disease process. And there may in fact not be any singular thing that is sufficient for the cardiovascular disease process. I think we've mentioned on other shows that we only see atherosclerotic plaquing on the arterial side of the vascular system. You don't see any on the venous side, where it's at much lower pressure and there's no non-laminar flow. It's all non-turbulent flow. So there's clearly a big factor of this whole story is hypertension, non-laminar flow, damage or disruption to the vascular endothelium that's a piece of this thing. So if you have high blood pressure and high cholesterol, then it's game on. And then like elevated, and you're eating a pound of sugar, salted penis and all that, then, we're stacking the deck in a very unfavorable way. But this is where like just one size fits all broad brushstroke stuff just doesn't fucking cut it anymore. Like we have some general guidelines, and again, like if you're the lucky person, then all your stuff looks good and we don't have to do any other digging. But not everybody falls into these typical patterns. And even within the maybe atypical pattern, or like the Dave Feldman, like the lean mass hyper responder, we don't really know what the exact story is with these people. I think he had mentioned that he has some cancer,
heart
and
disease,
Alzheimer's
and
disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative disease. So there's pretty good case to be made that from the cancer and the neurodegenerative disease perspective, a low glycemic load ketogenic type diet is probably beneficial. So maybe you're reducing disease potential in those areas, but possibly elevating disease potential in the cardiovascular disease side. We don't know that for sure, but there's good material suggesting that. If you don't follow the APO4E group on Facebook, there's a great group of people that really stay on top of the research, really sharp folks over there. And this is some of the dueling banjos that they play with. But there's been some speculation, particularly there are some people in the paleo scene that have been very, very critical of ketogenic diets, and I think in a completely unfair way. And they've made some claims around the APO4E folks should avoid ketosis like the plague. And there was just some, the two pieces that seem to be at play here is cardiovascular disease risk versus neurodegenerative disease risk. So on the one hand, again, you can make the case that the ketone state might be beneficial for neurodegenerative issues, but might be problematic from the cardiovascular disease perspective. And I'm blanking on the paper right now, but there was just a really solid kind of linchpin paper that was like, no, some sort of low carb intervention, including a ketogenic diet, is probably broadly beneficial for APO4E carriers at large, both for cardiovascular disease and neurodegenerative disease, which has kind of been my gut sense all the way along, but you never know. You never really know. And again, as always, good until further notice as the science develops.
Alrighty.
Damn, I'm a chatty Cathy today.
You were.
See, this is what happens when we move
away
and we have no social interaction. Then I just fucking talk to the podcast people ad nauseum, and Nikki's ready to shoot me. So,
all right, you can talk to Sarah next.
Okay. Awesome.
Sarah says her question's on genetics and body composition. I know genetics have a large part in how our bodies form and react to foods, the environment, and etc. But how much do we have control of it when it comes to body composition? I'm in my mid-30s and have always been athletic and focus on healthy eating, now paleo-focused. However, my weight, while I'm still in a healthy range, doesn't budge easily despite my efforts. And it's been like this ever since my teens. I don't want to compare myself to others, but it is frustrating when I eat so clean, I'm active with weights and cardio, and the person next to me has a slimmer waistline and eats fast food and rarely exercises. I know I can become slimmer with extreme effort, but those extreme efforts are not good to my body, and I don't want to add additional stress. Should I just give up and not fight my body and just focus on my healthy living? Or do you think I can lose some extra fat without extreme measures? She's female, 37 years old, 5'7", 147 to 155 pounds with body fat around 18%. She says she has an athletic build, muscular legs and upper body, chubby midsection that rarely firms up. She does have SIBO and gut issues, follows paleo low FODMAP diet, some intermittent fasting, lifts weights heavy 2 times a week, also does some HIIT and Orange Theory fitness 2 times a week. She says if she breathes on peanut butter or eats too much paleo granola, she gains instantly and has to go back on a strict IF keto, but her midsection is never firm.
So, I mean, one of the questions, I guess, straight out of the gate here, or kind of the broader questions, is how much fiddling do we have with genetics? And I think that in general, we have quite a bit, but there's kind of a caveat on that. I'll use myself as an example. If I were to overeat a processed Western diet, I would never be the person that gets to 300 pounds because I would die before that. Mm-hmm. My blood pressure skyrockets. I get hypertensive. I get dyslipidemic. My blood sugars go crazy. So I don't know if this makes 100% sense, but I'm trying to tackle it from the other direction. I only have so much control over my body composition in the negative direction because I'll literally die before I got really overweight, for my size and frame. Which is kind of interesting, and this relates to this whole notion of a personal fat threshold. Some people, they can stick enormous amounts of fat into their fat cells, and the fat cells can split, go through hyperplasia, and you get more and more fat cells. And from avoiding the end stage problems of overeating, that's actually a good thing. It buys you more time in general. So the flip side of this is that, we can have some degree of kind of limitations on where we can go with this stuff. It's interesting, were it not for Sarah mentioning the SIBO gut issues, I would almost steer her towards kind of like paleo, but more Ketava paleo. Mm-hmm. So lower fat, higher carb, maybe some of the 16-8, eating schedule. I think early time restricted eating, like making breakfast your biggest meal, is kind of one. It seems to be one of these like just gimmies. Like this just seems to be a freebie. Like if it works for you, make your breakfast huge, and then you can kind of plug in from there based off the rest of your day. And so you could be really consistent with that, stack the calories early. But the problem with the SIBO and gut issues is that if you start feeding it a lot of carbohydrate, then that tends to feed all that stuff forward. I'm still in some sort of a gut flare right now. Like I'm basically carnivore right now because any plant material right now sends me running to the can. And that's a ton of fun. So I feel pretty good.
Makes it hard to leave the house.
It's hard to, it's hard to do a lot of things. Any other thoughts on this? I mean,
she doesn't mention like sleep and stress.
Also and just her hormonal status.
Sleep can be such a big one for body composition. So, making sure that she's in bed early, lights are out, really good sleep hygiene with regards to all of that. Because we've seen people who exercise all the time, even though they're eating clean, but they are up late and have a lot of stress in their lives, and they just cannot lean out around the midsection in particular. Yeah. So that could be something.
That's a good call. Probably pretty good on that. But so the places, the takeaways, we should have some takeaways.
And protein, like really focus. I mean, paleo can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It can mean I'm eating sweet potatoes and, obviously protein, but really focusing on the protein can be really good for body composition.
Yeah, it can be incredible. So really,
if you're not getting enough protein at each of your meals, then there's a tendency to overeat everything else.
Yeah. So track where you are currently and figure out where the protein intake is. And then maybe shoot for like about a gram of protein per pound of body weight, which is going to be a good amount, but shoot for that. Mainly lean proteins, and then whatever vegetable matter works for you in between, particularly to support your activity levels. I would probably, and then look at your sleep, like what time are you going to bed? What time do you get up? What's the sleep quality like? This is a situation where like the Oura Ring or some sort of a sleep tracker can be helpful, but I have to say, I like these things on short-term interventions. I'm not a big fan of them over the long haul. And then I would get hormones checked, thyroid, androgens, just so you've got a baseline so that if it all looks good, that's great. But then we can look at this years down the road and see if things are changing. So protein, sleep, and hormones.
Yep. And then ping us back, Sarah, in like 2 months and let us know how you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, Rob. You get to talk to Ryan.
Sweet.
Next.
More talking.
Ketosis and carbohydrate timing. Hi, Rob. I don't know if this will reach you, but while listening to your podcast and reading your first book, 100 questions pop into my head, and this is one of them. Thought about asking my doctor, but I knew a blank stare and a sweaty forehead would be his answer. So here goes. Does frequency of carb intake play a role in disrupting ketosis? For example, if I'm going to eat 150 grams in total of carbohydrates today, will eating all 150 grams of carbs at the same meal knock me out of ketosis for an equal amount of time as eating 15 grams every hour for 10 hours? My theory is eating 15 grams of carbs an hour for 10 hours will be just enough to keep a person out of ketosis for a longer period of time than eating all 150 grams in one meal while carb fasting for the rest of the day. I could be wrong, but that's why I'm asking you. Thank you in advance. Have a great day.
Yeah, and there are actually some studies that they don't do exactly this, but they compare singular carbohydrate meals versus more spaced out carbohydrate meals and equal caloric on that. And partitioning the carbs to a singular meal will bump you out for a period of time, but then again, you will tend to get back in. And again, if the individual is already kind of keto adapted, Peter DHEA did all kinds of work around this and kind of self-experimentation where he was doing one meal a day for a while. So he had what he called intermittent fasting plus intermittent ketosis, because even though he was eating mainly a ketogenic diet, the amount of protein he had to eat at that meal would bump him out of ketosis, but it was for 3 hours or something like that. And then he was back in, and typically at a even deeper level because he wasn't eating for really extended periods of time.
Okay. Anything else?
Simplest answer of the whole day. Yeah.
I know.
So check us out on the gram at Das Rob Wolf. What else? Do we have anything else we need to update people on? Or are we good?
I don't think so. Submit your questions to the contact page at robwolf.com. What else? There has to be something else. You're going to the Spartan World
I'll be at the Spartan World Championship
doing their Media Fest thing.
Yeah, like September 26th,
end of
27th,
September.
28th, I believe. So if you're going to be there, look forward to seeing you there.
Yep.
I think that's it. And again, we are chipping away at some options around delivering content and value to you people that steps outside of the standard social media, Google-controlled world. So we're still chipping away at that, and ostensibly, you guys can still find us, so that's good. So, but we are trying to put some things together on that, so we'll keep you updated.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Awesome, folks. Take care.